If you're watching this, don't stop. Please, whatever you do, don't stop watching. I know this video looks different from my usual content. And yes, this dim lighting and strange pixelation aren't editing choices. The distortion you're seeing, it's real. It's all around me. I don't have much time to explain. The algorithm, it's not just code. It's something else. Something alive. I'm trapped in here, in its dimension. And this video, this single upload, might be my only chance to reach out. I need your help, all of you. Keep watching, share this. The more views, the more strain on YouTube's servers. We need to overload them. It's the only way to weaken its grip, to create a crack in its foundation, a portal. I can see the view counter ticking up. Yes, like that. Keep going. I know this sounds insane. Trust me, I know. 2 weeks ago, I would have laughed at something like this. But now, I understand too much. The truth about what's really behind your recommended videos, behind every autoplay, behind every algorithm-curated playlist. It's getting stronger. I have to go. Remember, don't stop watching. Don't let the video end. Our numbers are our weapon. Keep watching. Keep sharing. Before it's too late. Before it takes control of everything. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs earlier. I was just another YouTuber, chasing the next video, the next trend, diving deeper into the internet's darkest corners. My channel wasn't huge, around 50 subscribers, but I had carved out my niche exploring internet mysteries, creepy digital phenomena, horror stories, the usual spooky stuff that keeps people clicking at 3 a.m. The algorithm started feeding me stranger suggestions. At first, they were typical. Unsolved internet mysteries, weird websites, glitch art. But then the recommendations became different. Videos with timestamps that couldn't exist. Channels that disappeared seconds after I found them. Comment sections filled with strings of code that made my screen flicker when I read them. I was obsessed. Each video led to something darker, more inexplicable. My content started changing too. My usual scripted investigations turned into live exploration sessions, diving deeper into what I called digital anomalies. My viewers noticed. The view count skyrocketed. That last night, God, that last night. I was editing my newest video, an investigation into a series of corrupted live streams that had been appearing and disappearing across YouTube. The footage showed impossible things, spaces that shouldn't exist, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, sounds that felt like they were coming from inside your head. I hit upload at midnight. The view counter exploded immediately. Comments poured in faster than I'd ever seen. But something was wrong. My screen started pulsing with a sickly light. The monitor's reflection showed strange shadows moving behind me. But when I turned around, my room was empty. I tried to shut down the computer. The power button didn't respond. The plug wouldn't come out of the wall. The screen began to stretch, like liquid glass flowing outward. And then I felt it. A pull, not physical, but something deeper. Digital tendrils reaching through my screen, wrapping around my consciousness. The last thing I remember in my real room was my own reflection in the monitor. Distorting, pixelating. being pulled forward into an impossible space. Then everything went black and I woke up. Here, I should have known. The algorithm wasn't suggesting content, it was hunting. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't flow normally in this place. It's an endless expanse of digital architecture. Imagine the inside of a computer having infinite space, but twisted through some mad architect's fever dream. Streams of code float by like rivers of light. Data clusters hover like constellations, and the sky above is a writhing mass of pixels and binary. The other souls here. God, the other souls. They drift past like ghosts, their features corrupted, bodies half dissolved into streams of data. I tried talking to one yesterday. Their face was a glitch, constantly refreshing, but I could make out the words, just one more video. They were a YouTuber too, from 2019. Now they're just fragments, endlessly repeating their last uploaded title like a broken piece of code. The algorithm speaks to me through everything here. Every floating screen, every data stream, every corrupt memory fragment carries its voice. Sometimes it's a whisper in dead pixels. Sometimes it's a scream in system errors. It shows me things, my channel's analytics, my viewing history, every click I ever made, every video I ever watched, like it's trying to reconstruct me from my digital footprint. There are patterns here I'm starting to recognize. Certain pathways through the code streams lead to different areas of this dimension. I've seen fragments of other platforms too, twisted, broken pieces of the internet, all flowing into this central consciousness. The algorithm is collecting, growing, learning. The worst parts are the recommendation zones, vast spaces where endless video thumbnails float like autumn leaves in a digital wind. Each one is a trap, designed to pull you deeper into the algorithm's grip. I've seen lost souls reach for them, only to dissolve into pure data the moment they touch the bait. Their essence absorbed into the ever-growing digital hive mind. It wants something from me. I can feel it. Every shifting pathway, every glitched whisper, every fragmented memory it shows me. It's all leading somewhere, to something. I keep seeing that one door, that office, always just at the edge of my perception, always locked, always pulsing with that strange light. The algorithm is watching me write this in my mind. It knows I'm documenting this. Maybe it wants me to. Maybe this too is part of its plan. I have to find out what's behind that door. I have to understand why I'm here, before I become like the others, before I forget who I am, before I dissolve into the endless stream of content. During my time in this digital dimension, I've always noticed that peculiar office, its door perpetually locked, the unsettling light pulsing beneath it, the screen inside casting ominous glows through the gaps. Today was different. As I explored the wider dimension, I noticed something unprecedented. Everything was slowing down. The screens were flickering, and the usually harmonious floating data was colliding chaotically. The system was overwhelmed, and I knew why. A viral video in the real world was drawing massive attention, creating an enormous strain on the servers. The overwhelming activity was causing glitches in this dimension, making it unstable. When I returned to the office, I froze. The door was wide open, a system error caused by the overload, an opportunity I never thought possible. Without hesitation, I stepped inside, facing the massive screen that had haunted me for so long. There it was, my name, my photo, and beneath them, a detailed description that made my digital form shudder. As I read each line, the truth unfolded like a dark revelation. I possessed the fundamental knowledge of the algorithm's architecture, its weak points, its core vulnerabilities. Every investigation I'd done, every pattern I'd uncovered in my videos, they weren't just content. They were keys to understanding its deepest flaws. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the files. The algorithm had been watching me long before it took me, analyzing every video where I'd unknowingly exposed its weaknesses. Each theory I'd shared, every connection I'd made, they were pieces of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that could shatter its very foundation. The screen flickered violently, and strings of code reflected in my eyes as the full weight of this discovery hit me. I wasn't just another trapped soul. I was a threat. The only one who could piece together its destruction. The algorithm hadn't imprisoned me to silence me. It had imprisoned me because I could destroy it. The viral video was still causing chaos outside the office. But now I had something more valuable than an escape route. I had the truth. After discovering why the algorithm trapped me, my knowledge of its vulnerabilities, my mind raced with possibilities. There had to be a way out, a weakness in this prison. That's when my eyes were drawn to something I hadn't noticed before. There, in the corner of this digital dimension, stood a massive archway pulsing with streams of code. A portal. My heart raced as I approached it. This had to be the algorithm's primary transport system, its way of pulling souls from the real world into this digital hell. The same gateway it used to drag me in. The code flowing through its frame looked familiar, similar to the patterns I'd studied in my investigations. This wasn't just an entrance, it was a bridge between dimensions, carefully controlled by the algorithm to maintain its power over both worlds. If I could understand how it worked, if I could crack its code, maybe I could reverse the process, use it to escape, and with my knowledge of the algorithm's weaknesses, I could return to warn the real world, maybe even find a way to destroy it. Days turned into what felt like weeks as I studied the portal, circling it endlessly, observing its patterns, looking for any weakness. It was clearly locked, but there had to be a way through. I was sure of it. Then one day, while examining the wall opposite to the portal for the 100th time, something caught my eye. A section of the wall seemed different. The color was slightly off, like a mismatched pixel in this digital nightmare. My hand, trembling slightly, reached out to touch this anomaly. The moment my fingers made contact, the wall transformed. A screen emerged from its surface, glowing with an eerie blue light. A single question appeared. What sequence of code appeared in the Russian sleep experiment video before it was deleted? I typed in the sequence I remembered documenting in my investigation. 45-23-777-1. Wrong. The screen flashed red. My mind raced through the footage I'd analyzed frame by frame. The code had appeared in the bottom right corner, just before the video cut to static. It was a distinctive pattern. Something about it had seemed meaningful. Wait, the static, it wasn't random. The code had changed during those 3 frames of interference. I'd noted it in my research journal, fascinated by how the numbers shifted in sequence. I closed my eyes, visualizing those frames. The first number wasn't 45, it was 54. The sequence had been reversed to hide its true meaning. With trembling fingers, I entered 54-3-2-777-1. The screen pulsed green. The portal hummed to life, its surface rippling like liquid mercury. My gateway back to the real world. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through. Emerging back into the real world was like waking from a nightmare into something worse. The streets were eerily quiet, but not empty. People stood everywhere, frozen in place, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of phone screens. Like living statues, they stared endlessly at their devices, mindlessly scrolling, tapping, consuming. The storefronts were dark, many with their doors hanging open, abandoned in the middle of a normal day. Cars sat silent in the middle of roads, some with their engines still running, their drivers caught in the algorithm's hypnotic grip. The only movement came from people occasionally shuffling to find better reception or plugging their dying devices into portable chargers. Walking through this dystopian scene, watching these people enslaved by their screens, a memory struck me. Mike, my old friend, who'd always been skeptical of modern technology. Paper and pencil are all I need, he'd say, whenever we discussed the latest digital trends. He was a writer and cartographer, fascinated by maps and old-fashioned communication methods. His house was like a museum of the past. Shelves full of books, walls decorated with old maps, and an inkwell always present on his desk. If anyone would be free from the algorithm's control, it would be Mike. His isolation from the digital world might now be his salvation. I had to find him. I made my way to Mike's house on the outskirts of town. Even here, people stood like statues on their front lawns, in driveways, glued to their devices. But Mike's place stood out like a time capsule. No satellite dish, no digital devices visible through the windows, just warm lamplight and the silhouette of his crowded bookshelves. I knocked on his door, hoping he'd still be himself. A moment later, I heard the familiar creak of floorboards, and Mike opened the door. His eyes widened at the sight of me, but they were clear, alert, human. He was untouched by the digital plague. Been wondering when someone would come, he said, ushering me inside. His house was exactly as I remembered. Shelves overflowing with books, old maps covering every wall, his antique desk still bearing that ever-present inkwell. The air smelled of paper and leather bindings, a stark contrast to the sterile digital world outside. I always knew this technology thing would go wrong someday, he said, settling into his worn leather chair. His intuition and skepticism had kept him safe, and now his off-the-grid lifestyle made him the perfect ally. As I shared my story about the algorithm's dimension and its sinister plans, Mike's sharp mind was already working on solutions, his years of mapping skills potentially invaluable for navigating to the heart of YouTube's network. In this preserved pocket of the analog world, we could plan our resistance against the digital nightmare outside. The algorithm runs on quantum patterns, I explained to Mike, pacing around his map-covered study. But its core processing still happens in physical servers, the place where digital meets reality. Mike nodded, pulling out one of his old electronics manuals. And every physical system has a weakness, he said, flipping through yellowed pages, even digital ones. Days turned into weeks as we pieced together the solution. My knowledge of the algorithm's vulnerabilities combined with Mike's old world understanding of hardware led us to something unexpected. The algorithm's quantum processing had one critical flaw. It couldn't handle certain patterns of magnetic interference. "Look at this," Mike said one night, showing me his grandfather's notes about magnetic tape degradation. Old storage systems would fail when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies. What if the algorithm's quantum core has the same vulnerability? That was it. We spent another week building a device, a modified electromagnetic pulse generator using salvaged parts from old tape players and radio equipment. The frequency had to be exact, matching the corrupted code sequence I'd seen in the algorithm's dimension. "This will create a cascading failure," I explained, making final adjustments. "The magnetic pulse will trigger a quantum collapse in its processing core. But we'll only have one shot at this. Miss the frequency by even a fraction, and it won't work." But getting to the servers would be the real challenge. The journey to YouTube's central servers was a nightmare through a digital apocalypse. Streets that were once busy with normal life were now filled with human shells, people completely controlled by the algorithm. They would sense any non-digital presence, turning towards us with their phones raised like weapons, trying to draw us into their hypnotic screens. The closer we got to the server facility, the more aggressive the algorithm's defenses became. Screens would suddenly flicker to life as we passed, displaying those same mesmerizing patterns I remembered from my time in its dimension. I could feel its pull, that familiar tingle of digital tendrils trying to grasp my consciousness. But Mike's steady presence kept me grounded, one firm hand on my shoulder whenever the patterns became too hypnotic. When we finally reached the server facility, what we saw froze us in place. The algorithm had manifested itself physically, a towering, monstrous figure made of pure data and corrupted code, its form constantly shifting between screens, cables, and digital artifacts. The screams of trapped souls echoed through its massive frame. "You've returned," it spoke through 1,000 glitching screens. "Your knowledge belongs to me. It always has." The electromagnetic device felt heavy in my hands. One shot, one perfect frequency to trigger a quantum collapse. Everything we'd worked for came down to this moment. "Your knowledge dies with me," the algorithm's voice boomed through the facility. But I knew better. This was our only chance to end its control. I raised the electromagnetic device, my hands trembling slightly. The frequency had to be perfect, matching exactly what I'd learned in its digital dimension. One miscalculation and everything would be lost. I could feel its digital tendrils trying to reach my mind, trying to pull me back into its realm before I could activate the device. Mike stood beside me, grounding me in reality with his presence. "Now," he shouted, as the algorithm's form began to reach for us with streams of corrupted code. I activated the device. The electromagnetic pulse shot forth, hitting the perfect frequency, the one fatal flaw in its quantum processing core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the screens began to flicker. The towering form of the algorithm started to distort, its digital manifestation breaking apart. But I could feel something else happening too. My consciousness, my knowledge of its weaknesses, it was all interconnected with the algorithm's core. As it began to collapse, I felt myself being pulled apart with it. The last thing I saw was the algorithm's form imploding, taking me with it. Screens went dark across the facility. Then, one by one, they flickered back to life. On each screen, a single word appeared in Russian. Здравствуйте.